Hey, this is Don from Padlock Technologies again, back with another video. The long-awaited multi-context active high availability lab. That's what we're going to do today. If you know nothing about active multi-context or just multi-context in general, I just did a video on that. I'm going to put the little card up here, and I'm going to put a link in the description. Watch that video and then come back to this. And the reason why I'm saying that, because I noticed there's certain people or some people watch the configuration video and not the theory video, and then they're more confused when they watch the configuration video because they didn't see the theory video. Now, I'm not pointing at anybody in particular because I used to do that too when I first started out. I wanted to jump right into configurations, and then when I would see the configurations, I'm like, I don't even know what any of this means or why I'm even doing this, because I didn't understand the theory of what I was supposed to be doing in the configuration. So theory always comes first. Understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then learn how to configure it. With that being said, before we jump into the lab, you know I'm going to ask you for a favor. If you like stuff like this or you get value from this video, please don't forget to share, comment, like, and subscribe to the channel. Channel is growing. Appreciate all my subscribers. And if you could do me that favor, I would really appreciate it. With that being said, let's jump into the lab and I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so here's the lab. So let's explain this. We have two firewalls or two routers up here. So we're running VRRP and we're running version 3. So our first hot redundancy protocol is version 3 VRRP. Now what we're also using is sub interfaces. So that's why you see two groups here. We have our VIP group 1, group 1 VIP is going to be 200.101.254, and the other one's going to be 254. Why are we doing that? Because again, we're using sub interfaces, and we have VLAN 30 and or 20 and 30 that are going to its respective specific router. Then we have our two ASAs. Now, as you can see, I told you in the last video that we're going to have an admin context, a sales context, and a finance context. So both firewalls have these contexts in play. Now, what I want you to pay attention to, though, is the admin context. ASA 1 is the primary. ASA 2 is the secondary. The sales context, ASA 1 is the primary. ASA 2 is the secondary. But the finance context, ASA 2 is the primary. ASA 1 is the secondary. Exactly how I explained it in the theory video. And then we have our two, we're going to say users here. And one's in VLAN 10, one's in VLAN 11. So when VLAN 11 goes out, it's going to hit the switch. The switch is going to send it to ASA 2, and then it's going to go out to 255, actually 200.102.254. When user 7 on VLAN 10 goes out, it's going to go to ASA 1, and then that's going to go to 200.101.254. So this is the whole thing about the multi-context mode with the active HA, because I'm technically using both firewalls, but we're using it for different VLANs. Okay, so let's talk about what this looks like. So I'm going to open up both of the firewalls here so we can see. Now, right now, I think I'm still in the sales context and I'm still in the finance context. So what we're going to do here, we're going to back out of this. Now we're in the regular admin context. Now when we go show failover state. Hang on that first before we do that. So show failover state. You will see show failover state. You will see something a little different here. So you see these groups. This is the failover group configuration. And I'll show you this when we get in. I'll show you the admin context configuration for configuring the contexts and things like that. So as you can see, group 1, which is technically the sales context, is active on this firewall. So ASA 1. On the secondary, which is ASA 2, we're in standby ready. But on group 2, which is the finance, we are actually the secondary on ASA 1, and ASA 2 is active. So you see the reverse on the other side. So now let's take a look at some of these configurations here. So first things first, I'm going to show you just the run, right? Now, as you can see here, we're looking at port 0, which is going to the routers. So as you can see, port 0 doesn't have anything to it, but we have our VLAN configuration. So I did a sub interface for 20. That's going to be a VLAN 20, 30, or dot 30. That's going to be a VLAN 30. And then we have our Ethernet 1 and 2, which is going to be our failover link and stateful link. Then we have going downstream, we have Ethernet 3, which is technically the main interface, and then we did sub interfaces here, so VLAN 10, VLAN 11. And then let's look at the failover configurations. So I'm not going to really show you the secondary because all this gets ported over when you get to the secondary, so you don't really need to do the admin context stuff on the secondary. So typical failover configuration. So we have our failover LAN unit primary, that just stays the primary. On this secondary, it's going to be failover LAN unit secondary, but then everything else is pretty much the same. Now, how you get the active is you use these things called failover groups. So your failover group is going to be, failover group 1, preempt. Now you can say primary, but when you say primary, it just assumes that by default. So you don't really see the primary keyword in here, but you have to put preempt. And then the failover group 2, you see is going to be secondary and preempt. So what this says is whatever context joins this failover group, the secondary unit or the secondary firewall is actually going to be the primary for that context. So that's the important part of this. The other important piece, and the piece I forgot for like, I believe 30 seconds when I saw, and then when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot to do this, is this preempt command. If you do not add the preempt command in these failover groups, what will happen is the ASA1 will be active for both for all three contexts, the admin, the sales, the finance, or whatever context. I'll say context A and B. It will be the primary, and you're like, why is it not doing active? Is because you didn't have the preempt to tell router, or not router, ASA2 to take over as the primary for this context here. And then obviously I like to do my, failover IPsec pre-shared key. So I'm going to show you one command that I just typed in because it's, force habit here. And this is why you got to be careful, just always just being a config ninja, because what ends up happening is you just start putting in commands that you would normally do. And if you're not cognizant of what kind of active, like what kind of HA you're doing, you can end up doing this. So this failover replication HTTP is to, sync the HTTP information. That only works with active standby. That does not work in active. In fact, it will tell you this has no, use case. You can't use this in active, but it keeps it in a command, but it just ignores it. So now let's start talking about the context. So as you can see now in the video, I told you that you would probably have an admin context with an interface in it for management. I don't have that on, right? Because I don't need to do that in this lab. But in real life, you would have a management interface just to get into the box. Now, here's your sales context. So what's the basic necessities that you need to create a context? You need to actually say context, give it a name. Then you have to allocate interfaces. As you can see, I allocated, these sub interfaces to it, and I gave it a name. Now, when you get into the context, when you want to configure an interface, you're not going to configure ETH 0.2, 0.20. You're going to say interface outside because that's the name you gave. Right now, you can do things where you can say make it invisible, or you can make it visible. You do a lot of stuff, but I'm just showing you the basic stuff, the bootstrap stuff that you would need to create a context, and then go explore, right? Because you can allocate resources, CPU, you can do a whole bunch of stuff. But learn how to do the basics and then go and explore and then, find out a way you like doing it. Then this configuration URL, this is basically the running config or the startup config for that context. It has to go with config URL. I'm saving it on the disk and I'm calling it sales.config. So any configurations I do will be saved there. And then the join the failover group says, okay, you're in failover group 1. That's going to be on the primary. And then there's a preamp on that. Now, the finance context that I created, I did the same thing. The only difference is I said join failover group 2. And you remember on the failover group 2, I said secondary preamp. That means once we do the sync and we do the HA, we do the bootstrap for failover configurations, it's going to see, hey, this context, you're going to be the primary, secondary. So make sure that you are the primary after the syncing happens. Now, what ends up happening is once this is all said and done, if I want to make any changes, and this is where it gets kind of confusing for someone who's never configured active HA, when you want to make configurations on the secondary context that the primary is on the other box, and this is force of habit. You're so used to configuring everything on one box, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to the primary for that, or I'm going to go to that primary box itself and configure the secondary context, and it will tell you you're not the primary for this context, so now it's out of sync. So you actually have to go to the secondary box that is the primary for that context and make the configuration change. So that's what this basically looked like, and it's really basic. The other thing I like doing is changing the prompt. So right now I have the prompt configured as the device, the context, and then the state. So you'll see when I change into the sales context that the prompt will have 3 things instead of 2. Right now it says ASA1 active. And when I go into sales context, it will say ASA1 sales active. And then if I were to go into the secondary, it would say ASA sales standby, but then it would also be warning me saying, hey, don't make no configuration change because you're technically not the primary for this. So to get into the context, like I said, you go change to context, and we're just going to say sales. Now I'm in the sales context, right? So now let's look at the configurations sales context. If I go show run here, you're going to see totally different. So now what you see is our configurations that are specific to this context. So as you can see, I have my interface outside. Notice I didn't say interface E0.20. I said interface outside because I already named it that. I already gave it that interface an outside name. So everything I reference is going to be outside. Name it outside. The security levels. This only exists in the ASA. There's no such thing as security levels on FTDs. And then I give it the standard failover configurations with the standby address. So technically, ASA2 owns this address, right? .2. Same thing on the inside. We got .1. ASA2 owns .2. And then I have some basic, like, here's a network object. I believe I have some basic NAT stuff in here as well. I just did a basic NAT. Did some DHCP stuff here. DHCPD, so my downstream users are getting IP addresses from here. And then I had to mess with the default policy map because I have to put in this command here, which is expect ICMP, so ping would work. So if I show JCV bindings, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So that is the address of this user 7 machine right here. All right. Now, what if I want to see the context with the running config for finance? You would think you would do it here, but I can't, right? Or I could, but it's going to give me that warning. I actually have to go to 2 and go to change to context finance. And as you can see, it says I'm the active box for the finance, right? For the finance context. If this said standby, that would mean ASA2 is technically the active, but because I moved it for the failover group, ASA2 technically is the active. And hopefully I said ASA2 in the last thing I just said, but if something were to happen to ASA2, then finance would be active on ASA1. But right now, like I said, the confusion comes into play when you do this and your active context is on a different box than what you would consider the primary, right? So same thing here. We have 201, and then ASA1 actually owns 2.2. and it owns 10.100.2.2, right? On the ASA1 owns these two standby addresses, and then the primary addresses are here, right? ASA2 owns these. And then we have, again, our object. See the different subnet there. And then we have our DHCP, different subnet. And I did the same thing from the policy map perspective, just to allow ping to work. If we show DHCPD bindings, okay, so user 8, this machine here, owns that address, right? So now that's all said and done. If you want to see the run, if I do show route, as you can see, ASA2 for the finance context is going to go to 2.254. If I do it for the sales context on router on ASA1, I keep saying router for some reason, you can see I'm going to 1.254. So real quick, to show you on R5 what this actually looks like, I'm using the Boolean logic IP LSA. So basically I'm using an AND condition, and I'll show you here just so you get the full picture. So if we look at our LSAs, I have 3 LSAs, ICMP echoes that are going out of this outbound interface. I already have this started. I'm using these track objects here. And then I have a Boolean track object, which is this here, track. So this track 99 Boolean logic is going to track all 3 of the other objects. And it's basically saying all of these have to fail, right? All of these have to fail before the track object will do something. Now, when you're in your CCNA, you probably learn IP LSAs. I believe you learned that like at the end of the CCNA. They may have pushed that in there, or maybe at the beginning of the CCNP. I can't remember. But you only learn how to do one. They never really go into Boolean logic conditions. And I actually saw this. The reason how I learned this was I saw it in someone's config one day. And I was like, what is that? So I looked it up and I was like, oh, I didn't even know you could do that. So you have 2 ways you can do this. It could be an AND condition or OR condition. OR condition is any one of these can fail, and then the track object will be considered fail. I don't really like that because I like right on here I'm going to 1.1.1. You just may have a routing issue going to that. It doesn't necessarily mean you have an issue with the internet. So I use the AND condition to say, hey, if all of these are down, then it's more than just a routing issue with the internet, right? Because we're going to 3 separate addresses. And if you show the track object, you will see track 99. All of them are up, and they are being tracked by VRP v3. All right. So now let's just check the VRP. So you guys are getting the whole gambit here of configs. So here we go. Using group 1, priority 10, we're using our preamp. And here's the track object that's going to decrement this value of 110 by 60 if it fails. All right. And then R6 will become the active. All right. And if we go to 30, same thing. Using the same tracking object, we'll deprecate it. So right now, R5 is the active, the owner of the VIPs, so to speak, and will answer for anybody going to the VIP address. So now, got that. Let's look at, bring this down here real quick. And anybody want to know how I'm doing this with the terminal? I'm using I think it's called iTerm or something like that is what I'm using. Let's move ASA, and then ASA2 here. I'm trying to do this. So here's what I'll do. I'll move this over here. Get ASA one over here. I want to pull everything back over once I get everything in one thing. 2, 8. And then I'm going to pull every one of these over so you can see it. Hopefully this works. Yeah, I had a feeling that was going to happen. So what we will do is a quick, I need to actually grab this will work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly, there we go. This only works on the, unfortunately, you use VCPs if one window is already open and you click another one, it doesn't automatically allow you to type in there. We're going to go 1.1.1.1. Oh, one there. So as you can see, both of those machines can go to the internet. Now we go show connections on this one, show con. Add some detail to it. Put a detail. Do this again so I can get the connection fast enough. As you can see, here's my connection right there for the sales context, because remember this is user 7. And then we ping here and we do the same thing on ASA 2. If I do it fast enough, I can get the detail from it. If not, we'll just have to run it again. All right, do this. Let's grab the connection. Do this up a little bit. I gotta put detail in. Show con detail. There we go. So we can actually see the connection there. All right. Let me see if we at least getting some X-lax there. All right, there we go. So we get a bunch of this. That's basically the NAT table. That are being added to what? Which would show here too. So we got the NATs there. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's the connection. Let's the VC. I don't think you can repeat on VCPs. So you got to be quick to grab this information. We got that. We're good. Let's show NAT. All right, so we got our translated hits there. Show NAT here. Got translated hits there. And that's really it. I can't really show you too much, like, because I can't get to like a web page or anything like that. So I can't really make this like a Windows machine because it's basically a Linux box behind the scenes VPC machines. But I just wanted to show you that the connections, like we do this should go from 43 to whatever, say 47. So we are good there. So you see the NATs going up. That shows you, hey, remember I told you, user 8, which is on VLAN 11, should go through finance. The ASA 2 is the owner of that context, so it should go through ASA 2. That's what we're seeing here because we see the hit counts. And then the sales context, which is the primary on ASA 1, should go through ASA 1 sales context. And then from an admin perspective, ASA 1 is going to be the primary for the admin context. And that is basically multi-context mode with active-active HA. Right now, I could have did one single firewall and just did multi-context mode, but most of the time, especially probably in the lab, I can't tell you for sure, but probably in the lab, they're going to probably ask you to do this, which is do active-active HA with multi-context mode. So if you're going for your CCIE lab, watch this video again. Watch the theory video, because if they ask you this, you need to be prepared to do this. Let's get out this lab and let's review what we just did. Okay, so like I said before, that is multi-context mode with active-active HA. This is something you're probably going to see in the lab. I'm going to keep stressing that for anybody that wants to do the CCIE security. This is probably something you're going to see in your lab. Now, in the real world, you're probably not going to see this because it's not as complex once you get used to it. But this is like a corner case design thing, right? Most of the time, you're going to see active standby or clustering. You're not really going to see active with different VLANs going into different boxes or different contexts. If you like this type of stuff, like I said before, don't forget to share, comment, like, to subscribe. Tell a friend to tell a friend and review this, especially for my people going out there going for certifications. Hope you appreciate this video. Thank you and have a nice day.